Hi, my name is Gudrun from GE Designs, and in this video I'd like to show you how to cut bias binding with the Stripology Ruler. Now I love a good bias binding, especially if I'm binding a quilt that has rounded corners or is circular. For example, here I have my Positivity topper. I love to curve edges sometimes on toppers that have a lot of square shapes. And in this case, I just used a fat quarter because it's just a small topper. So at first we're going to start with just to show you how to fold and cut a fat quarter into bias binding strips. So we take our fat quarter, we're going to lay it face down on our cutting mat. We have the long ways going horizontal. You just want to take one corner, bottom left corner, and you want to fold it up. So now that salvage is even with the top cut edge. And now this little fold here, this is on the bias. So this is our 45-degree bias edge. So I'm just going to turn it because this is going to become our fold that we're going to be cutting our strips from. And then to make it small enough to fit under our ruler, I take the top corner here, I just fold it down so it's even with this little cut edge here. So now you're creating a tiny little fold here. I bring this one down towards the bottom one. And so now we have a nice folded piece that we can start cutting with. And now I just bring my ruler over. And normally I don't like to use the really tiny strips in the beginning. So I'm just going to start cutting right about here where I have that intersection come. And you want to find a horizontal line on the ruler. It doesn't really matter which one. And align that bottom fold with the horizontal line, and then just double check up here to make sure that your top fold is parallel with the other lines. So now I'm ready to cut, and I like to cut my binding at 2 1/4. So I have already marked up my ruler for the 2 1/4 inch markings. If you haven't downloaded the 1/4 inch cutting guide from my website, I encourage you to do that. It has any size 1/4 inch cuttings that you need to do marked on there. But so we're going to start with the pink arrows, cutting through our 0, and then just going to continue on through my pink arrows. This just makes it so that I don't have to think about it. I make all my cuts. I remove that first piece, and then I slide the ruler over to the right. So now that the cut edge is aligned with the dotted line, which is our 1/4 inch line on the ruler. And now I'm going to go and do my second cuts on the blue arrows. So on the 2, 6 1/2, and so on. And now I have my bias strips all ready to go. And look at that, easy to just piece together and put together into a long strip. This way you will get the longest strips you can get from the fat quarter. Plenty of strips to bind little toppers, runners, placemats, and things like that. So what if you need more binding? If you're piecing binding for a big quilt, so a fat quarter is not going to cut it. So now your pattern tells you that you need a bigger piece of fabric. So I have, this is I think it's 2/3 of a yard that I have here, salvage to salvage. And many tutorials will show you when you're cutting bias binding for bigger quilts to cut your fabric first into a square, but there's no need to do that. So I want to show you how I fold a full piece of fabric like this into something that I can work with my Stripology ruler. So I lay my fabric horizontally lengthwise, and I start just like I did with a fat quarter. I take the left bottom corner and fold it up so it's aligned with the top edge of the fabric here. I'm going to slide this over so you can see better. On this end, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pull this down so now it's folded even with that edge that I just folded up. And now I'm going to turn the piece. So now as you can see, I can do the same thing here. I can bring this fold down and align it with the bottom to do my cut. But I'm going to do one thing first. I'm going to take that left corner and fold it in here. all the way, like so. And now I'm ready to fold this down all the way down. So now we have 3 folds down here, which it would be very easy to go through with your 60mm cutter, but I think a 45 will be just fine. So now I have the fold. We just want to make sure we want to trim this fold off going through the 0 because that's going to trim our edge. So I'm just making sure that I have a line aligned with the bottom fold. I'm checking my top fold. It's looking good. And then I can just start cutting. And the same thing, I'm going to cut 2 1/4 inch strips. So I'm just going to follow my pink arrows that I have in place. And then I'm just going to remove that first little sliver that I trimmed off and make sure that this goes back. And now I'm just going to slide the ruler over so that the fabric is now lined with a 1/4 inch line and make my second cuts. And I'm using the blue arrows as before. And out of the 2/3 of a yard, you're going to get quite a bit of binding strips. And look how long these are now that you can get out of folding your fabric like that, and no need to be cutting it into squares first. So there it is. I hope you enjoyed seeing this video and will use it whenever you need some bias binding cut in no time. Thanks for being with me.